Hey guys, it's JaaackJack and welcome back to my channel and welcome to another Bible study video. So as you guys know, we are in a series right now of 1 Peter. We're going chapter by chapter, and in today's video we are going through 1 Peter chapter 3. I'm really excited. I have been absolutely loving this book in the Bible. I know we're going through this very slow, but I feel like when you go through the book slower, you are able to see things more. You're able to understand it better. You're able to really dissect what the word is saying and really take in God's word. And so I've been finding so much gold within this book. I hope this is feeding your guys' soul the way it's feeding mine, because I have just been obsessed with this book. So we're just gonna jump right on in. I'll give you a quick little recap though. 1 Peter chapter 1, it really talked about staying obedient to God even during sufferings and trials, and even being persecuted as an exile in a foreign country. And that's not being like literal, just being like a foreigner of this land and being an exile and being persecuted. Peter reminds us to still praise God even during those trials, even during that suffering. And then moving on to chapter 2, it really talks about, in my eyes, I see a lot of examples of the characteristics we should have as Christians going through trials and tribulations. Chapter 2 continues to tell us to resist evil ways and don't fight fire with fire. Instead, fight back by doing good, by living a good life and pursuing a holy life in Jesus Christ. Chapter 2 also goes on to tell us how we should live as Christians in this like non-Christian, non-godly society. And it's crazy that this was written so long ago, yet it's still so relevant to today. And now we move on to chapter 3, which I'm so excited about. There are some awesome themes within this chapter, and I just can't wait to dive into it with you. Just like last time, I really marked up my Bible a lot, so I'll be sure to take a picture and post it on my Instagram stories if you guys want to see exactly what I wrote in here. I mean, I'll go over it as I'm reading it with you, but if you want to see visually what this looks like, because it's all over the place. So before we get started, again, I am reading from the Jesus Bible. This is the NIV version. If you're using, your Bible app, you can just switch it to the NIV version to read the same version that I'm reading. Again, also, I'm still reading your guys' comments. I do have an NLT Bible and an NIV Bible. So for my next Bible study that we do, which book would you prefer me to do? NIV or NLT? Let me know in the comments. So without further ado, let's just go ahead and get started with this Bible study. Yay! So 1 Peter chapter 3 starts out by saying in verse 1, "Wives, in the same way submit yourself to your own husbands, so that if any of them do not believe the word, they may be won over without words by the behavior of their wives, when they see the purity and reverence of your lives." That already, those first two verses were so good. I did a box around submit yourself when it says wives, in the same way submit yourselves. I think that's really important. I think it shows humility to submit yourself to your husband, but not weakness. When we instantly think of submitting ourselves to a husband, we are like, oh, I have to disregard everything about myself and just kind of like bow down to them. And that's not what that means at all. I think submit yourselves to your husband really means to humble yourself and respect, like truly respect your husband and care for him in a very gentle way. That's how I read that. With submitting yourself, I think a lot of understanding needs to go along with that. To really submit yourself to someone, you have to really understand them and speak to them how they would understand and how they would appreciate But then I also, in those first 2 verses, I also highlighted, if any of them do not believe the word, they may be won over without words by the behaviors of their wives when they see the purity and reverence of your lives. I highlighted that whole thing and then went back in with a pen and underlined, they may be won over without words by the behavior of their wives. And I did a little arrow and I put lead by example. I think that right there, that little part is so juicy and so valuable, because as Christians, we want others to be saved, right? We want others to become believers. We want others to live a life for Christ and have a relationship. When you have a relationship with Christ and you feel that love and you just see the grace and mercy that God just shares and shines in your life every day, you want that for other people too, because it is so amazing. And so you want to share that with people, but a lot of times when you do it with words, it's not reciprocated. Is that the right word? It's not accepted. It's not understood. So instead, I think this is so important. Instead, use your behavior. Lead as an example. Let God's grace be shown through your behavior rather than just speaking it, because talk is cheap. Let's be honest. Talk is cheap, but your attitude, your presence, your behavior, that speaks volumes. So I think that alone was just so important. We're only 2 verses in and I'm already like, there's just so much gold within this chapter, you know? Oh, I'm excited. So verse 3, oh, I love this verse, you guys. It says, your beauty should not come from outward adornment such as elaborate hairstyles and the wearing of gold jewelry or fine clothes. Rather, it should be that of your inner self, the unfading beauty of a gentle and quiet spirit, which is of great worth in God's sight. I love that verse so much, and if I just keep reading that verse, I could go to tears. I don't know why that verse just speaks so much to me, and I think it's because of what I do for a living and the platform that I have and kind of where I started as, you know, a makeup artist, and this platform on YouTube. You know, I love makeup. I love hairstyles, hair tutorials, makeup tutorials. That's my jam. That's what I do. But I think it's so important. And I've said this from the very beginning, even before I became a follower of Christ. I have always said that you should feel beautiful from within. Beauty comes from within. It's not about the exterior. It's not about what's out here, what designer clothes you're wearing, what makeup you got on, how sharp your wing eyeliner is. It's not about that. And I think this verse is just so good. I highlighted the whole thing, of course. And I have a sticky note here. I put this a while ago. So this was like a note I made way before I even started like doing this deep study into 1 Peter. But I wrote, beauty today is so superficial and materialistic, which is true. It's important to remind women where true beauty comes from and not to be fixated on the standards that society sets. I think, this society, again, like I mentioned, is just so far from the things of God, and society tells us where the value in beauty is, which is completely wrong. It is false. Right here, this is where your value, this is where beauty comes from. Your beauty should not come from outward adornment, such as elaborate hairstyles and the wearing of gold jewelry or fine clothes. It's not saying in that verse, you're not allowed to do your hair nice, you're not allowed to wear nice things or jewelry. It's not saying that at all, but it's showing you where to put your value and your worth, your beauty. It does not come from those things. And it says, rather, it should be that of your inner self, the unfading beauty of a gentle and quiet spirit, which is of great worth in God's sight. That's like your inner beauty. It says it's unfading beauty. What's out here, it's gonna fade. We're not gonna be looking this cute forever, okay? As we grow, we're gonna deteriorate on the outside, but you know what's not going to deteriorate is the beauty that comes from within. Your heart, your kindness, your light that shines. And it says in here, the unfading beauty of a gentle and quiet spirit. And I think that's just, it's so beautiful. But a gentle and quiet spirit, I think, is misunderstood a lot of times by being meek or weak and just quiet and reserved. And I don't think it necessarily means that. I think that a gentle and quiet spirit is just that of humility, of wisdom, of kindness and love. And that is of great worth in God's sight. And if you are familiar with my beauty event that I have done twice now, called Beauty Under His Eyes, I think this verse just, these two verses, verse 3 and 4, just tie in what that whole event is all about, to where to find that true beauty and what beauty under God's eyes is all about. That, it says it right there. Oh, I love that so much. Okay, moving on to verse 5. For this is the way the holy women of the past who put their hope in God used to adorn themselves. They submitted themselves to their own husbands, like Sarah, who obeyed Abraham and called him her Lord. You are her daughters, and if you do what is right and do not give way to fear. You are her daughters if you do what is right and do not give way to fear. I highlighted do what is right and do not give way to fear. And I did a little arrow and I put instructions. I feel like there's so much, as I read the Bible, because I tell this to people all the time, I still consider myself very new in my faith and new to these different stories within the Bible that I'm reading. But as I'm reading these different stories, these different chapters, I see things that are characteristics of how we should be, basically instructions on how to live our life. And it says, and it said this within this whole First Peter, like multiple times already, to do what is right. And this says, do not give way to fear. And I've done a heart-to-heart video all about fear. Fear is a liar. Fear is the enemy trying to sneak up on you. So it's saying here, don't give way to fear. Don't give way to the enemy, to the evil ways. But just continue to do what is right. So that whole first beginning of chapter 3, it was talking about wives. So now moving on to verse 7, it's talking about husbands. It says, husbands, in the same way, be considerate as you live with your wives and treat them with respect as the weaker partner and as heirs with you of the gracious gift of life, so that nothing will hinder your prayers. So I love that it's not just telling women, like, submit yourselves to your husband, like, and basically bow down to them, end of story. No, it's an equal partnership, and it shows it right here that husbands, in the same way, it's saying, like, don't mistreat them, don't abuse them. Instead, be considerate as you live with your wives and treat them with respect. So I highlighted that whole thing because I think it's important. And then it says, as treat them with respect as the weaker partner, because physically we are designed weaker. Like, no matter how much I work out, Johnny's always going to be stronger than me. But that's just physical. It's not emotional. It's not mental, because it goes on to saying right after that, as heirs with you of the gracious gift of life. That means we are seen as equal within God's eyes. We are equally blessed with God's grace, equally. And I know some translations say co-heirs of the grace of life. And again, that just goes to show that even though structurally wives are the weaker, it's not mentally, it's not spiritually, because spiritually God sees us as equal, because he blesses us with his grace equally. And it says that we are co-heirs of that grace that God gives us. And it goes on to saying, so that nothing will hinder your prayers. So I did a box around nothing will hinder your prayers, because I thought that was just so interesting. Because when you think of just praying, you think, just say your prayer, but it's really not that. There's like an established relationship within your prayer time, like there's that relationship with God, and it's not just you sitting there saying off your list of things that you want in your life, you know? There's that relationship. And it says here, I mean, I know it's talking about husbands right now, but it's telling husbands to basically be good to your wives so that nothing will hinder your prayers. And hinder, I know we know what that means, but like really breaking it down, hinder says to create difficulties resulting in delay. And so basically, if you're not right with your wife, your prayers will be delayed. And I just thought that was so interesting to read. And so even though, again, this is talking about husbands, I still see that like we need to be right with the things around us, whether it's family, friends. We need to be right with those things before we can be right with God. Moving on to verse 8, I have a little subtitle here, and it says, suffering for doing good. And I think this whole book, 1 Peter, has been talking about that. So let's dive more into that. So verse 8 says, finally, all of you be like-minded, be sympathetic, love one another, be compassionate and humble. Again, more instructions on how we should be, the characteristics that we should have. So I highlighted that. And then verse 9 says, do not repay evil with evil. See, they've said that before in the previous chapter. Do not repay evil with evil or insult with insult. On the contrary, repay evil with blessings, because to this you were called, so that you may inherit a blessing. So I highlighted that whole verse and I put, don't fight fire with fire. Again, something that we've been continuously hearing within 1 Peter. Don't fight fire with fire, kill them with kindness. And I feel like that can definitely be hard. And I'd love to hear if there is something that someone has done bad to you. How can you repay them with goodness? How can you repay them with kindness rather than attacking them for attacking you? I do have an example I want to share. A few years ago, I received a threatening message from somebody. The vlog family, you guys already know this, but I received a threatening message of someone who wanted to sue me for reasons that weren't they weren't able to legally do anything about it. They were just so angry because Zoe's GoFundMe money went to Zoe. Doesn't that sound crazy? But they were so upset that none of that went to them, even though the GoFundMe stated that the donations for this were for Zoe's medical. This man was so upset over that, and he threatened to sue me and everything, and I was so heartbroken, and it took me a while to really kind of compose myself over this, and I prayed about it for the longest time, and then I finally sent him a care package, just a gift from my heart, saying I appreciate you for what you have done, and this is just, I don't have much to offer, but here's a gift from my heart to you, and I hope that this little bit can bless you in some way. But immediately when this happened, my first instinct was, I'm gonna get you back. I can sue you actually. Or you know what I mean? I wanted to fight fire with fire, but I'm so glad that I didn't. And honestly, my heart feels so much better that I didn't, and that I chose to instead send a small gift. Whether it was appreciated or not, it made me feel better to do something good rather than try and fight back. So if you have a situation like that that you're comfortable sharing, I would love to hear it in the comments below. How have you, I know I usually keep the questions at the end, but I felt inspired to talk about it now. If you have a situation where someone has done wrong to you, how have you turned it around and instead repaid them with a blessing? Let me know in the comments. Okay, so verse 10 says, for whoever would love life and see good days must keep their tongue from evil and their lips from deceitful speech. I did a box around tongue and lips, and I did a little arrow and put powerful tool or weapon. The tongue and the lips, it can be used as a weapon. This right here is very powerful. Our words are powerful. So it's saying to keep your tongue from evil and your lips from deceitful speech. That's hateful or I don't know what else to say. Deceitful, hateful, lying, false, hurtful speech. Again, this could be this could be of value, or this could be your biggest weapon that brings you down. Verse 11, they must turn from evil and do good. Again, we're talking about doing good. I highlighted do good. And they must seek peace and pursue it. I really liked that. I highlighted seek peace and pursue it, because we want to do good and we want this life, you know, here on earth to be all butterflies and roses, but sometimes it's not, and it's easy to just dwell on that. But I think this is that reminder to not just hope and like want peace and want happiness, but actually seek it and pursue it. Do something to achieve that peace. Because I think that right there just, to me, is like, don't just sit there and wait for it. Go after it. Seek peace. Pursue it. Verse 12, for the eyes of the Lord are on the righteous, and his ears are attentive to their prayers. I boxed that whole verse, and I did a little arrow. Actually, I have a bunch of arrows within that box, but I put, he hears those who are close to him. I heard one of our pastors at church say something along the lines of like, establish that relationship with God so that you aren't, so when like Jesus comes back again, or your time comes and you're going to the gates of the kingdom of heaven and you're stopped because God is like, I don't recognize your voice. I don't know that. You've never talked to me. I don't know you. And that like scared me. I don't want that to happen. And it's saying here that God is watching those that are righteous, and his ears are listening to those in prayer. And I highlighted righteous because we're not just born righteous. You're not like we're not. We're at the end of the day, we are flesh. We are human. We are sinful by nature, and therefore we are not righteous. But I did an arrow because I put, you can't be righteous without Jesus. Jesus died on the cross for us so that we may live holy lives through him. And it even says in the Bible that you have to go through Jesus in order to go to God. No one can go to God without going through Jesus first. And so in order to live righteous, you have to live with Christ. And those that are, God is watching and God is listening to your prayers. So again, he hears those who are close to him. That's why I think it's so important to really share the importance of establishing a relationship with Christ rather than becoming super religious. I always tell my family that it's relationship over religion. I don't call myself a religious person. I'm after a relationship with God, a relationship with Christ. Religion is, you know, when people say like, oh, I go to the gym religiously. Religion is a practice that you do over and over again. So yes, you could call me religious, but I think that's empty, because you could have someone who's religiously going to church and following what goes along with religion and things like that, religiously doing these things, but it can be completely empty if there's no relationship with God. Finishing verse 12, sorry, I didn't even finish, that says, his ears are attentive to their prayer, but the face of the Lord is against those who do evil. So don't do evil. Verse 13 says, who is going to harm you if you are eager to do good? I did a little arrow and I put probably those eager to do bad. And at the end of the day, when you look at that, why does that matter? Like, why do their thoughts matter? 14, but even if you should suffer for what is right, you are blessed. And I think overall, Peter's message that he's trying to get across is that you are still blessed, even though you are suffering. Yes, we are going to suffer in this life as Christians. It's inevitable. We are going to suffer, but we are still blessed. We are still blessed, even in the hardship that life throws at us. We are still blessed. Do not fear their threats. Do not be frightened. And that's in reference to Isaiah 8:12. So let's grab our Bible app real quick, or you can just flip in your Bible. I always find it faster to just go on my app. So it says, do not call conspiracy everything this people calls a conspiracy. What? Do not call conspiracy everything this people calls a conspiracy. Do not fear what they fear and do not dread it. You know the saying, monkey see, monkey do? It's basically saying don't do that. Don't do that. Don't monkey see, monkey do. Instead, verse 15, it says, but in your hearts revere Christ as Lord. Always be prepared to give an answer to everyone who asks you to give the reason for the hope that you have. But do this with gentleness and respect, keeping a clear conscience so that those who speak maliciously against your good behavior in Christ may be ashamed of their slander. Oh my gosh, I did so many markings here, but I think this is really something to kind of sit and think about. I highlighted, always be prepared to give an answer to everyone who asks you to give the reason of hope that you have. I don't know why that spoke to me so much, because I do have a hard time, not a hard time explaining why I believe in God, why or how God has shown his grace in my life. I don't have a problem doing that. But I feel like something I struggle with is to have an answer on the spot for people. And I think that's just me in my head trying to prepare my testimony so precisely and perfectly without any error or flaws. But sometimes you just have to speak your heart, and I don't know why that's always been such a struggle for me to do, especially in person. I feel like I'm on camera when I'm alone. I mean, I know there's so many of you watching right now, but live right now I'm alone speaking, and it's so easy for me to just pour my heart out like naturally and organically. But in person, face to face with people, I don't know why I get so nervous. I do have social anxiety, but that shouldn't be an excuse to not be able to speak the hope that I have in Jesus and the grace that God has shown in my life. I should be able to speak that to people, and I don't know why I get so nervous, and I feel unprepared in a way. And I know that sounds silly, but that honestly is something that I struggle with. And I don't like this about me, but I feel like it's just the perfectionist in me that is just, I want to have the perfect answer for you. And if I don't have the perfect answer for you, I'm not going to say anything at all. And it doesn't need to be like that, honestly. But I also did a box around, but do this with a gentleness and respect. And I think that's important too, because I mean, I could just speak about why I believe in God and the hope in believing in Jesus Christ and just surrendering your life to him. I could talk about that. I feel like a lot of you already understand this. You can't just speak that way to just anybody, because it's not going to be reciprocated. I've said that. That's the second time I've said that word. Let me Google and see if that's even the right word that I'm thinking of. Yeah, so I am using the right word. Okay. You can't just speak that way to anybody like outside of the church, you know? It's not always going to be reciprocated the way that you want. So you have to do it in a gentleness and respect. And I think that goes back to when I was talking about wives, like showing by your behavior. I think, again, that speaks volumes rather than your words. And you just have to also be respectful, because even though I know what I believe in, I am not going to sit there and be disrespectful to somebody if they don't believe in the same thing that I believe, you know? And I know that I have shared this here on my channel, that even though I'm opening up more about my faith, I'm not here sitting and telling you that you need to believe what I believe, or else you can't follow me, you can't be my friend, I'm not gonna like you, I don't respect you. Like, no, it's not like that at all. I also highlighted verse 16, and this spoke so strongly to me. It says, keeping a clear conscience so that those who speak maliciously against your good behavior in Christ may be ashamed of their slander. Again, I feel like I'm just opening up with you guys. This has been something I've been struggling with, because I do have people in my normal day-to-day life that don't understand kind of this shift in me and my belief and in my faith, and kind of the direction that I've decided to take my life, because I was on this path of just money and success. Not saying success and money is bad, but I knew the way that I was going about doing it wasn't true to me. It didn't fit well, it didn't sit right with me, and I think that's why I just fell into such a weird time in my life. If you watch my my testimony video, then you already understand, but I decided to make a shift in my life, and I have not gone back. And because of that, the people in my life, they don't truly quite understand it, and when they question me or mock me, instead of where it says always be prepared to give an answer to anyone who asks you and do it with gentleness and respect, instead of being like that, I get like defensive and I get upset, and I fight fire with fire. And I'll be honest, I do, and I know that I shouldn't, because when you take a step out and you look at it, what does that show them? That's not going to ever want to change or convict or move their heart to want to pursue what you have. You know what I mean? You have to lead by example, because when you fight fire with fire, the fire only gets bigger, you know? And so when someone is speaking maliciously about you and your faith and basically persecuting you as a Christian, and you fight back, it's only building that fire, and it's not going to settle down. And so that person that is attacking you is never going to see like the wrong that they're doing. They're just like, oh, okay, I'm gonna keep going at this because it's getting her all wild up. I'm gonna keep going at this. But instead, and I think this goes for like bullies as well, but if instead of fighting fire with fire and trying to fight back and defend yourself, like putting your fists up and defending yourself, instead if you just do right and just really hone in to that gentle and quiet spirit that it talked about earlier in this chapter, if we really like hone into that and we have this gentleness about us and we speak with respect and we continue to do good and respond in that sort of manner rather than fighting fire with fire, they're going to feel bad for how they treated you, whether this is talking about your faith or just a regular bully. They're going to feel embarrassed for how they treated you. And if they don't, I mean, that doesn't matter. That's not the point. But here we're focusing on ourselves. Like when we're reading this is like instructions on how we should be. And so verse 16 really like spoke to me. I need to get better at kind of toning it down and not trying to fight back, because at the end of the day, that gets us nowhere. So verse 17 says, for it is better if it is God's will to suffer for doing good than for doing evil. Verse 18, for Christ also suffered once for sins, the righteousness for the unrighteous, to bring you to God. Again, that goes back to talking about righteousness, how you can't have righteousness without Jesus. And it says it right there, for Christ who also suffered once for sins, the righteousness for the unrighteous. That's us, unrighteous. But yet Jesus makes us righteous to bring us to God. It says he was put to death in the body, but made alive in the spirit. After being made alive, he went and made proclamation to the imprisoned spirits, like the broken spirits, the unbelievers, the doubters. Verse 20, to those who were disobedient long ago when God waited patiently in the days of Noah while the ark was being built. In it, only a few people, 8 in all, were saved through water. And this water symbolizes baptism that now saves you also. Not the removal of dirt from your body, but the pledge of a clear conscience towards God. So I'm sure everyone knows the story of Noah's ark, right? Where Noah built this ark and there was a huge flood that just destroyed everything. And the reason that happened was because God saw how evil and corrupt the world had become, and he was so hurt and upset by it. And yet he saw Noah, who was a righteous man, living close with God. So he told Noah, build this ark because I have to destroy this. We need to start over and start fresh. And so really that was like a cleaning, a cleanse of the earth, of all of the bad, all of the sin, all of the corruption. And when the flood went away, that was sort of the rebirth. And so that can be looked at as like a baptism, because it's the same way we go in the water, not to be cleansed of the dirt or anything, but once we come out of the water, that's our rebirth in Christ. It says it saves you by the resurrection of Jesus Christ, who has gone into heaven and is at God's right hand with angels, authorities, and powers in submission to him. So that is the end of chapter 3. It wasn't very long, but I just felt like I talked a lot through it all. But like I said in the beginning, there's just so much gold within this chapter, and I felt like so much was speaking to me as I was reading it, like on just how to be and what I need to change within myself. The beginning, when it talks about wives and husbands, or just like anytime I'm reading the Bible and it talks about wives and husbands, I think I see so much value in that, especially because Johnny and I aren't married yet. So that way, when we do, like when that time does come and we get married, like we know how we should be as husband and wife. So chapter 2 of 1 Peter, I said, has like so many characteristics of how we should be, but I also feel like chapter 3 has so much instruction, and like it shows like the different characteristics we should have as Christians and as believers and as followers of Christ. I would love to hear what spoke to you within this chapter. Like, what did you hear as you were reading this along with me? So within 1 Peter, there's so much instruction on how we should live our lives, and I know that I've mentioned this in in the previous like studies within this book, but it talks a lot about our purpose as Christians. And I think ultimately what we're reading time and time again is to love one another. And it says here in verse 8, be like-minded, be sympathetic, love one another, and be compassionate and humble. And I think it talks so much about that, and I think that's what we're called, that's how we're called to live our lives as believers. Our purpose, it is said here in the Bible, in the book of Matthew, that we need to go out and make disciples of all the nations. And I think here we're learning more how to really do that, how to really share God's grace with other people in a very gentle and respectful manner. And just going back to the wives and husbands part in the beginning of this chapter, I think this is something that I think maybe a lot of people can relate to. If your husband is not a believer, let them be won over by your behavior. And I think that's huge. And again, I know Johnny and I aren't married and we're not husband and wife, but I don't know if it was this exact verse or if it was like a similar type of verse, but I remember when I first started going to church, and how crushing that was for mine and Johnny's relationship. We were on the verge of breaking up because I was going to church. Like, it was just so bad. This was like 7 years ago, but he was so against me going to church, and I thought we were going to break up. And then I read a verse, and again, I don't know if it was this verse or something similar, but it was talking about wives, and it was saying, like, even if your husband is not a believer, don't leave him, stay with him, and so that he may come to Christ through you. And again, Johnny and I aren't husband and wife, but like I've held on to that verse our whole relationship. In case you guys are just tuning into my channel, Johnny and I have been together for nearly 12 years now. And so I've held on to that verse all these years, and I've held on to Johnny even though we didn't see eye to eye and we weren't on the same level of faith. And you know what has been the most crazy and beautiful transformation? And I know that God is still working in Johnny's life, but actually seeing it has been so amazing. Johnny is slowly coming to Christ. I see it, I hear it, and I'm not gonna sit here and say that it was me. I'm not gonna say that. It was God. Hands down, it was God. But as his partner, I think I've played a lot of influence in his life, and I'm really grateful for that. That's the kind of influence that I do want to share. that's the kind of influence I do want to have in people's lives. And just seeing Johnny slowly, I mean, this has been a 7-year journey, but seeing Johnny slowly coming closer and closer to Christ. He listens to Christian music. He has gone with me to church a few times. He tells me that he's praying and he talks to God. Johnny 7 years ago was not like that at all. And so I think I just wanted to share that in case anyone can relate to these first like 2-3 verses. Maybe your husband or significant other isn't on the same level of faith as you. Maybe they're not a believer and you've questioned like, do I stay or do I go? Maybe this verse spoke to you the same way that it spoke to me so long ago when I was struggling with, do I stay with Johnny? Do I leave him? Like, he doesn't want to go to church. He doesn't even like me going to church. Should I just leave? But again, 7 years in the making, and I feel like God is still continuing to work in Johnny's life, because I know Johnny's not fully there yet and fully committed, but I've seen the transformation already, and it's been the most beautiful thing. The most beautiful thing. So I wanted to share that little testimony relating to that verse. But even though it says that, you know, we're the weaker ones or we need to submit ourselves, your influence and your behavior impacts those around you so much more than you realize. So I think that's such a good reminder. I feel like I'm losing my voice. I feel like that's such a good reminder to really understand how you are acting and really pay attention to the type of behavior that you're, I was about to say oozing. That's the behavior that you're oozing. That sounds weird. But that the behavior that is shining from you. Pay attention to that, because it does play a huge influence to those around you. So much good stuff within this chapter, you guys. I hope you enjoyed this, and I cannot wait to read your guys' comments. Please share what spoke to you in the comments below. And if you, I mean, again, I said this in the last study, but like, I'm just telling you what my eyes are seeing as I'm reading this. If your eyes are seeing something completely different, or God is speaking to you in a different way within a verse, and you have a completely different taking or understanding of the verse, I want to know that too. Like, share in the comments below. I would love to read it. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you guys again. If you're here just for the Bible study videos, I'll see you not next Sunday, but the following Sunday. I do these Bible study videos every other Sunday. So I'll see you then for 1 Peter chapter 4. Thank you guys again for watching. I love you so much, and I'll see you next time.